New York City, March 1998. At the Carlisle Hotel, Bemelman's Bar. Friday night at Bemelman's. Once upon a time, natty rabbits in flannels and serge are taking cocktails on the walls under awning-striped umbrellas. A sleek and dubious Italian flames up a cigar in the shadows of the bar, where martinis are stirring, while a courtly Mr. Minton caresses his piano and "Isn't it romantic?" here at Bemelman's. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to show 195, coming to you live from the stirred, not shaken coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet, illuminator, and guiding spirit in the poetosphere, Colin Goedecke, a voice here and elsewhere for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Last week's broadcast, number 194, was on generosity. All the ways we can think of, experience, and witness it. Can be generous ourselves. Can live in a spirit of giving. Appreciate the freely made gifts and gestures of helpfulness of others in providing their time, encouragement, support, emotional to financial and more, without a quid pro quo. Also the continuous largesse of the natural world. This week it's cocktail hour, unwinding time, loosening up, easing back, slow sipping and carefree enjoying time. Whatever your literal or vicarious drink of choice, cocktail to mocktail, whiskey to wine, chartreuse to champagne, maybe a martini, maybe an old-fashioned, a Negroni, or a Campari Soda. As we take an armchair tour, a bar chair tour, we might even say, in a way, of cocktail eras, scenes, people, fabled drinks and drinkers, songs, films, clothes, the altars of alcohol, the delights of imbibing, even the pixelations. And some words from fellow listeners who wrote in about this. Well, I have applied mixology of a kind to create a spirited show for you of cultural commentary, poetry, quotes, anecdotes, and inquiry around this theme. And I have a lot of wonderful material. I had to keep cutting it down. There was just so much, and it was all good. So fill your glasses and let our cocktail hour begin. Why don't we start with some concocting on the summer solstice, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, June 21st, 2017. The poet's mouth. Beauty flows out from the poet's mouth. Also in this day of summer solstice, with a same named for the occasion cocktail, in a highball glass, with well-muddled lime wedges soaked in Gray's Peak gin, fresh squeezed lime juice, a Royal Navy sailor nod, a boy-red splash of Aperol, 3 drops of grapefruit bitters, ice, a good stir, and a generous toast to the lyrically giving and receiving mouths and hearts of our true and troubadour poets. Always toasting them, past, present, and to come. This next is a bow to the signature cocktail of Bermuda, the dark and stormy. Maybe you've had one before. Maybe you've had more than a few in your time. This is from one of my times there. Always delightful times, and always marked by at least some of those cocktails, of those dark and stormies. This was July 2017 at Tucker's Point. It was a dark and stormy night. Rain-soaked, rum-soaked, ginger-beard, wool-sweatered, knee-socked, 895 miles out to sea, drinking in the weather. It was a dark and stormy night. And hello to my dear friends and sometimes hosts there, Hugh and Uta. They're there right now as we speak, and drinking in the sun and color, and maybe a dark and stormy. I will ask them when I talk to them again. Well, we'll go to an entirely different place in the world. We'll go to the Aegean, to the Cyclades, to a fishing village on the island of Kea, Galiscari. The ouzo hour. The hour when limbs loosen, eyes soften, anise, ice, and water alchemize. Sun dissolves into saffron, chartreuse. The upper bodies of bathers become half gold, the lower half blue. Moon phosphoresces. Spirit floats. Conversation flirts. Night coalesces. The ouzo hour. And that was the place, actually, that island, that time, 2 summers back to back, where I acquired a taste for and love of ouzo and of retsina, the resin-flavored Greek white wine. Yes. Well, we'll spin the dial of geography again, and this time we'll go all the way to the Inside Passage of Southeast Alaska. So it was at anchor in Sanford Cove there, July 2009. This was while I was on a floating wilderness journey for 10 days with 2 other chaps. We were 3 men in a boat. I just thought of that, actually, as I was writing some notes here. It was a 41-foot halibut fishing boat, and the captain was off duty from fishing and taking me and my wonderful fellow friend on this journey. And it was incredible. And we were exploring the Inside Passage. He was a very wiry captain, and he knew those waters for decades, like the back of his hand, which was very important. But we could get into places no larger boats could go, and we did. Well, one night, under the Alaska stars, we surprised the captain with a fine bottle of single malt that we had kept secretly hidden away, and ice chipped from an iceberg. Because there were there, even in July, they have icebergs floating around, some quite large. So this was whiskey and ice. The tip of an iceberg sits in a bowl on the small table in the cabin. Pure and ancient ice, at least 100 times older than our 12-year-old single malt, that we chip into 3 glasses and sip slowly, reverently. Yeah, shout out to those the captain, Captain Dan, and my friend Peter from England. We'll never forget that time. Well, how about some quotes? James Thurber. 1 martini is all right. 2 is too many. 3 is not enough. James Thurber. He would say something like that. Ron White, I don't actually know who he is. If life gives you lemon, make lemonade, and find someone whose life gave them vodka. I have to share that with my friend John Tasca. He'll like that. He's a great lover of vodka on ice. Lots of ice. Betty Davis, the actress from Back in Time. There comes a time in every woman's life when the only thing that helps is a glass of champagne. Yes, thank you, Betty. Well, there was a rather a remarkable, colorful, real-life character Back in Time who was a famous balloonist in Paris, one of the first. He was a small fellow, very elegant, and there's a wonderful book about him, small book, called Man Flies. I've read that many times, given that away too. Man Flies. So this is for Alberto Santos Dumont, the real father of aviation. The Belle Époque Aeronaute. Dandy Santos Dumont, flying his yellow silk demoiselle over the summer gold treetops of old postcard France, or steering his beloved little Brazil and its floating red banner over the fashionable hats and houses of Paris, landing on the terrace of a favorite cafe, then lifting off like a champagne bubble after lunch with his Panama hat, high collar, and elegant mustache. Yes, look up a picture of him. He's quite dashing in his little balloons. And actually, they created Cartier, the famous jewelry company, created the wristwatch for him, so he could fuss around with operating the balloons without having to pull out a pocket watch. Yes, it's true. Well, how about this from Vermont University Libraries? Cocktail History in America, The Age of Entertaining, 1933 to 1980s. We're just going to talk about just the beginning part in this cocktail hour. The Cullen-Harrison Act went into effect on April 7, 1933, and the end of Prohibition was just around the corner. By the end of that year, America had its cocktails back in the legalist of senses. An abundance of new cocktails and mixed drinks survived dark days, and cocktail bars returned to the limelight. In the 30s, tiki culture was born, though it would really take off after the return of World War II soldiers who had been stationed in the South Pacific. By the late 40s, cocktail guides were written for every host or hostess wannabe, and throwing cocktail parties, complete with savory and often strange canapes, was the, quote, in thing to do. Some bartenders returned to America, others stayed abroad, but regardless of vocation, many emerged as respected authorities and authors. Cocktails were influencing pop culture and vice versa. Corporate sponsorship became common, with companies giving away pamphlets full of recipes. You might be surprised how many late 60s and 70s books and pamphlets on astrology-themed cocktails you can find. In the middle and later part of the 20th century, vodka and tequila and mezcal gained popularity, and rum, an early product of the American colonies, returned from its dormancy. All three joined gin, brandy, and whiskey, and the old triad of base spirits grew substantially. Increasingly, though, cocktails and mixed drinks contained more ingredients, wandered farther away from their 19th century origins, or just disappeared in favor of a set of popular classics and new standards. So, how about that? Okay, well, taking us back in time, in a way, just a moment here. I'm hoping everybody can hear me just fine. I was noodling with the mic from last time around, so we had better sound. Well, this is a poem from one of a number that I composed a few years back at a famous old private club, and I call this and others from that set the Club Sandwich Collection, which I haven't published yet, but I will. This was, I was looking at the time at the various framed invitations and announcements and things that I was playing off of them poetically. So this is Deliveries from the Club. Reads the copper-plated card in 1936 ink, now under glass on the wall near the low-lit bar where cocktails are still shaken and stirred. The club has been presented with a Ford station wagon and can now make a daily delivery of 12 or more bottles of wines and liquors to members living within a radius of 5 miles from the clubhouse. Additions to the list, it goes on to say, prices alarmingly charming from the day. Campbell King's Gold Seal Scotch Whiskey in quarts, $3.50. Red Cap Sparkling Burgundy, $2.85. Clos Au Perroquet, 1933, Sauterne, in half bottles, 80 cents. Well, wouldn't you like to go back to those prices? And a quart of whiskey. I like that they had it in that kind of volume. Well, here's another one. This was my play on an annotation on the following. The club schedule of proposed activities 1938. October 20th, buffet dinner dance after the Princeton-Harvard game. Sore losers will not be served dessert. November 13, special train to Princeton-Yale game. Whiskey sours and Havana cigars will be provided coming and going. December 4th, dance, quote, baby party. Members to please come attired as toddlers of your choice. Dry gin will be served in nippled rubber baby bottles. I hadn't read this in a while. Sorry. I can't help myself just thinking of that picture, that image. There is no image, but imagining it. December 29, children's entertainment will include skating on the South Pond in club-nose mittens and pin the mustache on Adolf, Herr Hitler, not Monjou. December 31, New Year's Eve dance. Frozen melon balls will be dropped into member champagne glasses at 1 minute to midnight. January 1st, Governor's Eggnog Party. The club will provide lampshades to members after their 4th nog. And January 22nd, Stag Evening. Tuxedos only. Gentlemen, remember to wear your antlers. P.S. There will also be various bridge activities. So stay tuned for the club sandwich collection when it comes out. I'll let you know. I'll share more of it. From encyclopedia.com, Cocktail Hour. The cocktail hour, quote cocktail hour, was an hour or two of refined, civilized relaxation after work and before dinner when adults had an alcoholic drink, a cocktail, and chatted with friends. The ritual is usually associated with the Jazz Age and Prohibition, 1920 to 33, and with the post-World War II, 39 to 45 era. But cocktail historian Stephen Goedecke says that since New York hotels were already serving tea at 5 o'clock in the early 20th century, quote, it was a short leap to the 5 o'clock cocktail hour. I did not know that. Cocktail hour was symbolized by urbane, sophisticated people sipping a martini and enjoying hors d'oeuvres at a club, and was associated with the Hollywood elite such as Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn. By the 50s, it had become a common suburban ritual. Cocktail hour and cocktail culture made a brief comeback in the mid-90s, celebrated in films such as Swingers and in the music of bands like Combustible Edison. Well, I didn't know some of those things, and you may not have either. Roddy Lumsden has this poem, The Shuffle. Skipping out from the major international cocktail party with my becleavaged blight, a Jeroboam in her tight fist, I broke open my copy of Sarcasm for Beginners, that is, Men. Never had I seen so many pairs of to-the-elbow gloves. Never did I see a puttied ceiling groan so with thin talk as the great, the grim, and the gone-pressed, terrible flesh. So many penguins offering tastsome wisps and skims from doilied salvers, cherry-shaded caviar, cheese puffs, dark-sugared berries, dainty octopods, gently vinegared, with not enough tentacles to count the capes and stoles, fine bespoke pashminas, silk snoods, at least one vicuña suit tainted with gold thread. I'd seen down a Blenheim, 2 lime rickeys, and was eyeing a gamine mixologist who was straining out Savoy Royales when my rattled nemesis limped over to announce she had encountered my latest screed, all 4'11" of her tortoisely quivering, a nubbin of cream cheese on her whiskery lip, and her good eye withering my borrowed compagnette as she leaned on air. I am not a man who has not known the turmoil women offer, the gift you accept of their wit, the way you'd slip a hand into a glove full of cockroaches. Comply with a last-minute call to join a seal call. Tanya, I pouted, I am awed and honored you opened a window in your schedule even to glance at my inconsequential outpourings. At which point she clattered out a scoffing jibe so sour you couldn't blend it with a chemistry set. From Hamley's, and seizing my escort by her neat wrist, we tore out into Jermyn Street, along which I performed a sort of shuffle, one eye on the book and one eye on Milady's competition standard backside as she led us to the Ritz. The shuffle. Thank you, Roddy Lumsden from England. Okay, more quotes. More quotes. We'll splash them in here. Hold on. And by the way, I do have some gin. A little bit of gin here. A sipping gin. It's an Old Tom gin, so it's not white. It's a little sort of buttery colored, and it's quite delicious. But I thought in honor of that, I rarely have cocktails anymore, but I love thinking about them and talking about them. But I have a little sip for me tonight, and us, and toasting you all along the way. Sylvia Plath. I began to think vodka was my drink at last. It didn't taste like anything, but it went straight down into my stomach like a sword swallower's sword and made me feel powerful and godlike. Sylvia Plath. Steve Allen, the comedian. Do not allow children to mix drinks. It is unseemly, and they use too much vermouth. The comic actor W.C. Fields, way back in time. Everybody's got to believe in something. I believe I'll have another beer. Oh, I wish I could do his voice. Very classic. Oscar Wilde. Work is the curse of the drinking class. That's a good one. Thank you, Oscar. O.W. How about this? From the Costume Institute of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Dressing for the cocktail hour. Yes, the cocktail dress, and even a whole fashion statements around it. This is, here we go. I'll give you a little bit. By 1929, with the aid of liberation parties like the Women's Organization for National Prohibition Reform, women had become more visible in the social sphere, and the, quote, modern woman was born. This, quote, drinking woman was an ideal rooted in newfound concepts of individuality and a denial of Edwardian matronly functions. She emerged at private cocktail soirees and lounges, and the cocktail dress, as a short evening sheath with matching hat, shoes, and gloves, was designated to accompany her. The cocktail affair generally took place between 6 and 8. Cocktail garb, by virtue of its flexibility and functionality, became the 1920s uniform for the progressive, fashionable elite. And on. But I give you a little slip of that. Well, cocktail talk. We also have that, not just dress. We have the talk. And this is, and of course, you know, having been, I'm sure, at some cocktail parties, that you can go from the small and insubstantial, or only that, to the sometimes large and fortuitously consequential conversation that can happen, or sometimes at least begin, and then continue somewhere else. Robert Vandermolen, A Bowl of Fruit. When I think of that room, I see the de Kooning at the end of the hall. Sometimes rain on the long windows or the tinkering of drops on the skylight, but not Yvonne splashing scotch into a cocktail glass, otherwise fastidious. In retrospect, I should have asked her more about the famous jazz guitar she had been engaged to, but that much was true. Even after she bought me a pocket knife sheathed in velvet. Every young man needs a knife, she informed her group, but in the restaurant her friends eyed me like a turnip. I'm so giddy tonight. I don't know why. It's not the gin. I only had a little sip. Maybe more would calm me down. Eyed me like a turnip. One that talked. While she was away at her office, I tried to read her unfinished essay on the vagaries of diplomacy. Reclining on a rug of embroidered storks, the two small Rodins seemed misplaced. A grand piano she didn't play, though I did, affecting a controlled passion while gazing over rooftops at carefully maintained gardens. I don't remember her smell. I don't recall her fingers. The last I heard, she was living in Barcelona. She never did learn to cook. Now her letters are worth money. Thank you, Robert Vandermolen, A Bowl of Fruit. I have to read more of his. He's new to me. Okay. Oh, well, absolutely I have questions. Here we are. We've arrived at them for you and all of us. Got all sorts of questions and other things here around them about cocktails and cocktail hour. What are some of your best remembered cocktail times? What are they? A great cocktail hour or party you were part of? Or a favorite scene involving cocktails you read about in a book or saw in a film or heard about in a song? Do you appreciate a good cocktail? A good drink? Maybe just a pure spirit? A good sipping rum, sipping bourbon, rye, or single malt, or some gin, or a welcome glass of wine? Or maybe you're a mocktailer. If so, what's your go-to? Well, the last great whiskey I had, and I have a little bit left, absolutely one of my favorites. It packs a punch. It was a rye. Hughes Bell of Bedford, toasted in barrel straight rye, given to me by my fellow adventurer in the wilds of the world, Henry Hargreaves, also known as Double H. Well, good to the last drop, and I eventually there will be a last drop, and my favorite single malt from the Highlands of Scotland is Bunnahabhain. Try that if you love single malt and you haven't heard of it or had it. Bunnahabhain. I think I've got that right. Bunnahabhain. Discovered that in Scotland years back. Well, were there any great conversations you still remember, or stories that were told, or secrets that were revealed over cocktails? When did you ever have a first martini? I remember mine. I was at university. I was at Georgetown. I was in the Foreign Service School. I was a freshman, sort of later in the year there when this happened at Georgetown, and in Georgetown when this took place. And I had a great friend. He was the campus Catholic minister, Father Kuzik. Hello to him if he's listening. And he once took me to lunch at the local watering hole called the Tombs. It was down under an old townhouse that housed a fancy restaurant called the 1789. And I remember he said, "Why?" He had a martini, which he often did. And he said, "Why did you have one?" I said, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "Well, try one." Well, I remember trying one. And I remember that we finished lunch, and I said, "I'm not sure I can stand up." He took my elbow. Well, I got out, up the stairs to the fresh air. Feeling very lovely, actually. It was quite nice. But what about you? When was the first time you got tipsy? Or more so? And when was the last time? Yes, I'm curious. You don't have to tell me, but you could. By the way, there was a fellow I knew during my New York City life. He was a veterinarian to the stars. And I remember one night when he and his wife, they were good friends, came to dinner at my place. Well, she took me aside and said, "Don't give him any gin." Well, I understood without hearing any more that it would not go well if I let him have gin. He'd become like a Jack Russell Terrier on steroids or something. So I didn't, but anything else was fine, like vodka. And he had a goodly amount of that. Well, we all had quite a lively time that night. 3 animated couples. And more on that knees up another time. But what about what's taboo for you? Some alcohol you don't touch or shouldn't touch. Maybe all kinds. Maybe you are a teetotaler. Mm-hmm. And what about growing up? Was there a cocktail hour? Maybe a martini hour? Your parents? I know my mother rarely imbibed, but it was part of my father's side of the family. And I know when my dad came home from work in early years when he was still around in the family, he always had a bit of whiskey. He loved Pinch. That was Scotch. That was his favorite. I actually have a bottle of that. I've never opened it. Great bottle. A pinched bottle. But very jovial, convivial. All of the gang on his side. Everyone was always in a buoyant mood. Maybe the whiskey helped, and I have a poem about that at the end, about one of those moments. On a poignant note, my father-in-law was a man who loved a good drink. That's how he said, "I like a good drink," and martinis. And when he developed late-stage lung cancer in his 70s and was not long for the world, though he looked well enough, he decided to have weekly martini hours and invite friends that he loved and knew he wouldn't be seeing again, or they him. Usually it was just 1 or 2 people at a time, and I was invited to be there as often as I could, which was often. In his swan song days, and I would make the martinis. He didn't want to discuss his illness with anyone. No, just enjoy the drinks and the company, and he did, and it was beautiful, and everybody appreciated that time. And speaking of time, if you could take a time machine back somewhere in history to have a drink in a period and a place somewhere in the world, where would you land yourself? What century and what country and what place and what watering hole or setting and what drink and who with? How about that for a question? Well, so I heard from various listeners and others in my circle, when I told them I was doing this theme, different people wrote in, so I want to share some of what they said. Here's B from Rhode Island. When I need to play it safe, I have wine. But when I really want to roll up my sleeves, I have scotch. Well, how about that? Can you picture that? And how about Pam, also from Rhode Island? Favorite cocktail moment? The fabled Hemingway Bar at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Among the most famous is the dry martini. Well, she said, I was there in June of 2019 and had the specialty cocktail of the evening. It was served with an orchid and was $35. The Ritz in Paris. And on a side note, we'll hear about it again in a minute. Ernest Hemingway was a Ritz regular. He wrote that Paris was the Ritz, a permanent party, a place full of promise. From the 1920s onwards, he made the bar his headquarters and over the years forged a friendship with bartenders Georges and Bertin. Chloe from England, from the Cotswolds, she said, Psycho Pomp Gin is Bristol's best, but my inevitable favorite is Bombay Sapphire. Enjoy raising the glasses, she said. And we are. I hope you're raising theirs right now and tipping a bit of spirit in, or whatever your libation is. This is Dick from Texas. Seeing the play, A.R. Gurney's The Cocktail Hour. Having a dram of Islay single malt. Meeting a variety of people for the first time over a cocktail, most of whom continue to be good friends. And Dick, by the way, is in his 80s, so how about that? And I want to play you a short voice clip from the chap I mentioned, my New Zealand soul brother, Henry Hargreaves, because he said this to me today. He said, don't think I wasn't going to weigh in on this, because he also did some serious bartending in his time, way back in time. But here, let me cue it up for us.
Calino, good morning. Out walking the dog, first thing. Not even the crack of dawn yet. Anyway, saw your email about the cocktail themed session tonight. So I saw you had some questions. I'd love to contribute if I could. Anyway, comes to mind a few cocktail stories. One is every time I go to Paris, always have to go to Harry's Bar, the home of the Bloody Mary, and they also have this amazing swag. They have these two little mascots called the barflies, and they have these little dancing flies with top hats and canes, and I always love to get like a little tie. I've got one, some lapel pins, and a few other bits and pieces. Also, while I was in Paris, I went to the Hemingway Bar at the Ritz, which, you know, he famously sort of drank at the end of the Second World War, and told stories as if he had sort of fought the Germans off by himself from the bar stool. But anyway, however it went down. But I went in there as quite a young and thrifty young man, where my pennies were being stretched out as far as they could. And I went in there and ordered myself a cocktail, and looked up on the wall, and they had a plaque for the Guinness World Record of the world's most expensive cocktail, which I asked what it was, and they said it was the Ritz Sidecar. I'd ordered a Negroni. So as you know, Sidecar and Negroni, not too many differences in amount of ingredients. And my sort of heart sank when they told me it was 1,500 euros for this Sidecar. And I had that kind of... But they then told me there was a brandy that had supposedly been made in Napoleon's time and was one of his favourite, which I used in the Sidecar. I remember telling the bartender what was the point in using a good brandy when you're mixing it with lemon juice and sugar, which didn't go down too well in Paris. And then when the bill finally came, I had that kind of moment of, well, I think it ended up being about 23 euros or something for the Negroni, which was still pretty expensive, but also kind of fell in that place of being somewhat let down that I wasn't being charged this astronomical sum from the home of the world's most expensive cocktail and having a great story to tell. but kind of just ended up being a little bit of an insult for having an overly expensive cocktail with a sort of somewhat poor service, but in a storied bar. Then a couple of others. My favourite cocktail would be the Ramos Gin Fizz, a brunch cocktail, and notoriously difficult to make. I tried to master that for years when I worked the brunch shift at several restaurants, and got to say I only pulled it off a few times, and that is why I would say that this is my favourite cocktail, because of the thrill of when it's done properly. It's almost like a souffle when done properly, where the cream that you've shaken for minutes on end comes up above the glass rim. And the tastes are out of this world. It's cream, lemon juice, rose water, gin, lemon. It's it's like such a wacky combination of things, and they come together in the most perfect way. And then my final little anecdote will be, I was down in New Orleans on the brink of Hurricane Katrina. I was actually there as they were starting to evacuate, or I should say, let people know they could leave voluntarily if they wanted. And we went down to the Salzerac bar in the Fairmont Hotel, which is this beautiful old establishment, sort of wooden walls and just like beautiful. And there was an old bartender there, old black man, who kind of reminded me of the keeper in The Shining, who comes over, kind of a wise old soul. And we asked for a Salzerac, seeing this was the home of the Salzerac. And he poured in the absinthe, and the Salzerac's supposed to have a absinthe wash inside the glass. And for his absinthe wash, he poured in the absinthe in the bottom of the glass, and then tossed the glass high in the air, with the absinthe spinning around, coating the inside of the glass, and the excess flying off in all directions. He caught it and then poured in the rest of the cocktail. And it was just an amazing experience to see this from this man who'd been doing it for so many years. And then I was so saddened to hear that the bar was destroyed in the hurricane. So I got one of the last ever Salzeracs that he poured in this bar. Anyway, brother, I can't wait to hear the episode. Loads and loads of love from Brooklyn. Speak soon. Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you, Henry. That was wonderful. Had to share that with you. And I hope he's enjoying listening right now. And in his honor, actually, the Negroni Hour, a poem of mine. This was lunching at Via Carota in the West Village, New York City in 2016 with a dear friend. This is one of my favorite cocktails also. And it's the Negroni Hour. And I was sitting with my wonderful friend at the time, Janie McCarroll Erickson. The Negroni Hour begins Italianly in a shady grove with an alchemy of gin, amaro, Campari, and a bright peel of orange, is poured smoothly over ice and left unstirred to form a sensuous sunset in my old-fashioned glass, in my smiling eyes, that when sipped slips oh so coolly, velvetly, bitter-sweetly over warm lips, the henna-burnt sienna umber nectar filling the mouth and silking down the throat. As across a well-laid table I toast with zest my lovely and lively companion, a rarely cocktailed young lady who first suggested such a louche for a luncheon notion, the last thing I expected, who then proposes and indulges through passes of delicious dishes in a surprising second liquid tramonto, and then a more surprising third. The free-floating afternoon mixing high-spirited flavors and feelings in a most marvelous, cumulous way. I remember it well, and needless to say, I floated several feet off the sidewalk somehow to my home, way uptown. Well, on a last splash of question note for you, one more before we go on. I'm curious if you averaged out how many cocktails you have a week multiplied by 52 weeks times the number of years that you've been drinking them, what that grand total or subtotal, if you're not finished, might be. And the answer is The envelope, please. From Mental Floss. Actually, I think a little further sip of gin here. I'll save the rest for the end. And we might go a little bit over tonight, if that's good with you. Cocktail hour just a little extended. I have just other wonderful things I want to share if you stay with us. But from Mental Floss, as I continue flipping through my copy of the Dictionary of American Slang from 1967, it seems like every page has a new term for, quote, drunk. We've discussed on a toot, a drunken spree, and the zings, a hangover. But here are some new old worlds to try out on your boozy friends. Pigeon-eyed, squiffed, swacked, owled, soapy-eyed, canned up, pruned. My favorite, actually, is I first heard of the 1930s film My Man Godfrey. Still love that film, seen it dozens of times, is pixelated. That's my favorite word, when you're pixelated. Well, as some know, I'm often given to thinking about not just poems and books and quotes and anecdotes, but films and songs. And do you know this Irish song, Whiskey, You're the Devil? This is from folkandswitch.com. Whiskey has a prominent place in the history of the frontier. There's, of course, the obvious reason, but one must not discount the economics. It takes a lot of grain to make whiskey, and a barrel of whiskey is easier and cheaper to transport than wagons full of grain. Whiskey or the Devil seems to have its source in a broadside ballad titled John and Moll, which dates from Ireland sometime after 1790. It was popular in the Ohio River Valley prior to the Civil War. Then it would likely have had very different lyrics. These lyrics were popularized by the Irish folk group the Clancy Brothers in the late 50s. It's a fascinating journey that the lyrics took, the military part of the song apparently dating to the Napoleonic Wars. We just heard about Napoleon and his brandy. Then blending with what was likely a traditional Irish drinking song. War and whiskey once made a very good match. Perhaps if the world would have less of one, we might have ended up with less of the other. So here's just a little taste of it. Traditional Irish song version, 19th century. I'll just read this or share this one part. Whiskey or the devil, you're leading me astray, over hills and mountains unto America. Your sweetness from the bleachner and spunkier than tea, oh whiskey, you're me darling, drunk or sober. That's how it goes, a little bit. Okay. I'm going to pass on that one. I'm just going to read you the beginning of Tony Hoagland's poem, Summer in a Small Town. Yes, the young mothers are beautiful, with all the self-acceptance of exhaustion, still dazed from their great outpouring, pushing their strollers along the public river walk. And the day is also beautiful, the replica 19th century paddle wheel perpetually moored at the city wharf, with its glassed-in bar and grill for the lunch and cocktail seekers who come for the Mark Twain happy hour, which lasts as long as the Mississippi. And there's more to that, but you can find that at poetryfoundation.org. Thank you, Tony Hoagland. And a friend of mine was asking me, well, how did they come up with happy hour? Why did they call it that? Now, I don't know the answer, but if you do, let me know. I'd like to hear. This is from A Writer's Life by the writer Gay Talese, Talese. He was a godfather of literary journalism and a sage of the writing craft, and he tells us about his daily routine and working environment. When I am writing, each morning at around 8 o'clock, I am at my desk with a tray of muffins and a thermos filled with hot coffee at my side, and I sit working for about 4 hours and then leave for a quick lunch at a coffee shop, followed perhaps by a set or two of tennis. By 4 p.m., I'm back at my desk revising, discarding, or adding to what I had written earlier. At 8 p.m., I am contemplating the numbing pre-dinner delight of a dry gin martini. Martini man. Isabel Allende from Aphrodite, a memoir of the senses. In his memoirs, the Spanish film director Luis Buñuel gives his recipe for the perfect martini, allowing a ray of light to pass through the bottle of vermouth and for an instant touch the gin. Anita Pullier, it's the 50s. Pulier. It's the 50s. At about 6 p.m., my father exits the F train, walks 4 long blocks home, arrives smiling, weary, removes his rumpled suit, crooked tie. Mom, in an apron, gently shoos us away, while 2 martinis on a tray slosh from kitchen to porch. Before dinner, before questions about homework and tests, 2 martinis, each with an olive, create a filigreed space on a louvered porch in Queens, defining so much more than evening. Lovely. That's Anita Pulier. It's the 50s from her collection, The Lovely Mundane. I hope you're having a good time. Hope you're feeling good. Hope the spirits are swirling around inside you in a good way. Well, this is from my experiential exhibition of theater on paper, Behind the Curtain. This was one of the colorful characters that emerged in that show, and it's his story poem. There's also an image of him, which you're interested, I will send it to you. The Man of the Hour. High in his hat, deep in his cups, supping as he has on oceans of wine and courses of speeches served up in his honor, to flavor the occasion of his elevation to higher society, where sobriety is increasingly taboo, where all the self-styled gents place themselves up on pediments, praise themselves with gin, and, yes, with the most magnanimous compliments. This is from The Marginalian. This is Maria Popova piece, a note on the classic The Savoy Cocktail Book. For all its blessings and fascinations, retromania is easily at its most delicious when it comes to vintage food and drink, from the cocktails of madmen to yesteryear's bizarre food concoctions. But there's hardly a better way to add some vintage class to your life than with the Savoy Cocktail Book, a compendium of drink recipes from the 20s and 30s when prohibition-dodging Americans visited London's iconic Savoy Bar for, quote, tea dances and, quote, mixed drinks, shaken and stirred by our iconic American barman Harry Craddock, who invented the White Lady and popularized the dry martini. Published in 1930, it features 750 of his most beloved recipes, from slings to smashes, fizzes to flips, alongside stunning Art Deco illustrations that capture the era's elegance and sophistication. Yes, wonderful book. Much to savor and enjoy there. It's like being in a spirit-infused time machine. Speaking of time machines again. You know, there's all kinds of interesting cocktails, but have you heard of the French 75? This is from themanual.com. A masterful blend of gin and champagne. F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway drank it to their heart's content without any pesky government interference. It was a roaring 20s cocktail, and it was called kind of a bare bones one because it was very simple. But it actually appeared in Casablanca, the film, with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman at Rick's Café Américain in the 42 film of that name. Yes, well, there was plenty of alcohol featured in scenes set in the bar, which wonderful just for that, and plenty of glasses of wine and brandy and Veuve Clicquot 1926. But the drink that skyrocketed to fame after being ordered by the character Yvonne, played by Madeleine Lebeau, is the French 75. It's named after a French artillery cannon. It's a sparkling wine cocktail with gin, lemon juice, sugar, and champagne. We mentioned Mad Men. VinePairHQ.com talks about that and the old-fashioned that had gone out of fashion until the Mad Men series. And Don Draper, that was his favorite cocktail. And so 10 years later, it roared back into the most successful cocktail of the past decade at the time. How about that? Yeah. I mentioned my father-in-law before, but he was one of the original Mad Men himself. Doyle Dane Bernbach. He was a legend of live TV, a TV director, directed JFK's campaign and voice of Firestone and all sorts of other great programs of the time, live programs. And he was the Martini man, as you heard. I had many with him over time. George Carlin said 1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila, floor. Wish he was still around. He'd have other things to talk about in the world. Ernest Hemingway, I drink to make other people more interesting. How about that? Ogden Nash, candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. Oscar Wilde again, after the first glass, you see things as you wish they were. After the second, you see things as they are not. Finally, you see things as they really are, and that is the most horrible thing in the world. What a character, what a wit. But Galileo said, wine is sunlight held together by water. Isn't that beautiful? I love that. Well, I myself have invented many cocktails over the years, especially during a side gig as a mixologist at that private club I spoke of earlier in the town that I actually grew up in when I was spending time in that nearby town to that, and elsewhere, where I was known as the Spirited Man. How about that? That was my moniker. Well, here are some of the names that I gave them. Each one also came with a, quote, splash card that I made, square splash card, like a flashcard, splash card, and a vintage poster that paired with it, and a recipe so that you could make the drink. Here they are. Here's some. A Fresh Start. Let's Rumba. The Basil Rathbone. A Lobster Tail, Tale. The Cool Cumber. The Harvest Moon. The Fire Starter. A Cloud 9 cocktail. The Chariot of Fire. A Witch's Broom. The Painted Desert. The Humdinger. A White Elephant. The Cococolino. The Late Bloomer. The Cherry Bomb. The Fig Leaf. The Stag. A Whiskey Hemi, that was made in honor of Ernest Hemingway for an event, Poetry on the Plate dinner I put together, and a Black Mambo, a Silver Spur, and the Sleigh Ride. So maybe I'll make those again sometime for somebody, somewhere. Another one from that exhibition, that immersive exhibition of theater on paper, Behind the Curtain. This is from the debut, spring 2018, New York City. The Connoisseur. Well acquainted with wines and liqueurs of the finest kinds. Can tell by eye and smell how well they'll drink before any poured nectar passes over their lips, teeth, tongue. Because, mesdames et messieurs, the taste for the true connoisseur begins long before any cork is pulled and ends long, sometimes a lifetime, after all is swallowed and done. Yes. You may remember, by the way, speaking of films earlier, wanting to speak about them, this is from MissCharming.com site. Cocktails and film. We spoke a little bit about the history of the women being finally allowed in to have drinks, but there are a couple of films that are great films to me. 1935, The Thin Man. William Powell and Myrna Loy drink Knickerbockers. And there's a scene where Powell is giving the bartenders advice on drink making. He says, the important thing is the rhythm. Always have rhythm in your shaking. Now, a Manhattan you shake to foxtrot time. A Bronx to two-step time. A dry martini you always shake to waltz time. He also tells Nora, this will make 6 martinis. Nora says to the waiter, all right, will you bring me 5 more martinis, Leo, and line them up right here. They were big drinkers, at least on the screen. You'll probably find that scene, the martini scene, somewhere in YouTube. The Philadelphia Story, how about that, with Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, James Stewart. They drink Kir Royales. And Jimmy Stewart says, champagne's funny stuff. I'm used to whiskey. Whiskey is a slap on the back and champagne's heavy mist before my eyes. Like that. And The African Queen, Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, 1951. He has several cases of Gordon's gin on board his boat. He says the line, this air, isn't it wonderful? Yeah, it's like, I know you don't approve because she's a teetotaler, but it's like a shot of gin. It makes your blood race, your face numb, and your spirit soar. Yeah, The African Queen. Some Like It Hot, 1959. Marilyn Monroe makes Manhattans in bed in a water bottle while on a train. That's a great film. And how about one more? 1961, Dr. No. James Bond orders a vodka martini shaken, not stirred, and jumpstarts the sale of vodka in America. The vodka martini goes viral. Look at what a film can do. It's like JFK when he stopped wearing hats, and almost all the men stopped. Hat business went out the window. How about the oldest wine bar in the world? Al Brindisi in Ferrara, in Italy, established in 1435. It attracted some of the most important figures of the arts and sciences. The Renaissance sculptor Benvenuto Cellini, the painter Titian, the mathematician and astronomer Copernicus often visited the bar. How about that? Would you like to go there? I've never been there. I'd like to go. Go to punchdrink.com and look up Modern Alchemy at Tokyo's Most Radical Bar. It's about Hiroyasu Kayama, a star Tokyo bartender. He is totally seductive and cinematic. Videos of him alchemizing cocktails in this amazing little bar. Go to YouTube and look up Japan's Greatest Bartender. You'll find it. You'll find him at amazing work. Okay. Just going to edit here as we go a little bit. Okay. This poem, coming down soon to our last batch of things. Single batch. This poem occurred to me back in New York in 2004. It's another for you on the whimsical side. Turning wine into water. That other miracle that occurs daily, nightly, from New Canaan to Newcastle, at wedding feasts and village fetes, and high and humble tables, a miracle that's small and personal and particularly human, where the body of each imbiber, in short order, turns red and white wine into water. Yes. Well, some people know that, not for me, but cigars pair with their spirits, especially their whiskey, certainly in literature. And this is from the Yucatan coast of Mexico, 1999. Las Bocanadas, the puffs. Of an evening, usually approaching cocktail hour, when a good wind comes up, the clouds over Cozumel roll into Robustos and Churchills, Imperials, and double Coronas, light themselves with the first flames of sunset, and puff off to Havana. Another from the Yucatan, 1999. Here they call it limon. The lime is more than sublime in your cold cerveza and salt-spackled margarita. Under the equator, it's a welcome wedge to jolly jactars long at sea and turbaned havildars making G&Ts for their sahibs. It's the key to a famous Florida pie no lemon could ever be, and without this tart fruit, there'd be no lime green leisure suit. That's a nod to Ogden Nash. Actually, if he was around, I'd send it to him. How about this? How about cocktail science, cocktail physics? This is by the great and entertaining physicist Richard Feynman, Feynman, from the Feynman Lectures on Physics. A poet once said, "The whole universe is in a glass of wine." We will probably never know in what sense he said that, for poets do not write to be understood, but it is true that if we look in a glass of wine closely enough, we see the entire universe. There are the things of physics, the twisting liquid which evaporates depending on the wind and weather, the reflections in the glass, and our imagination adds the atoms. The glass is a distillation of the Earth's rocks, and in its composition we see the secrets of the universe's age and the evolution of the stars. What strange array of chemicals are in the wine? How did they come to be? There are the ferments, the enzymes, the substrates, and the products. There in wine is found the great generalization. All life is fermentation. Nobody can discover the chemistry of wine without discovering the cause of much disease. How vivid is the claret, pressing its existence into the consciousness that watches it. If our small minds, for some convenience, divide this glass of wine, this universe, into parts, physics, biology, geology, astronomy, psychology, and so on, remember that nature does not know it. So let us put it all back together, not forgetting ultimately what it is for. Let us give one more final pleasure. Drink it and forget it all. Thank you, Richard Feynman. Thank you. Anthony Giovaniello is actually chatting, and I rarely have a chance to look, but he's saying he loves a sake, cold with a dash of vermouth. Well, I'll have to have that with him sometime. Thank you, Antonio. From St. Augustine by the Sea, late July 2013, The Beachcomber. I was thinking about memories of things. Here's a couple. Sandy-haired from half a summer's rovings, the beachcomber, today on the old coast of Florida, in a place the Spanish settled in 1565, begins by stepping from hard, high sun into the heavy shade of a beachside bar bearing his name. Standing at ease in rolled linen sleeves, he orders a bottle of Newcastle Brown from the leather-browed barman, then washes it down in a cold rush, watching the late July heat beat down out the open doors on the dunes, on the colored umbrellas, on the hatted heads of the slow-passing bathers and surfers. On the South Fork of Long Island, Bridgehampton, New York, one summer, for Louis and Suzanne, toward the lavender hour. You, Picasso aigu, in your summer straw, shading blue eyes and sailor stripes, juggling a bubble of cold wine. Your long demoiselle sheathed in black, head full of blonde oak leaves, hydrangea eyes, begonia lips blossoming a kiss. The fragrant hedges bumbling with morning memories of bees, now lushed with evening sun and soon a layer of lavender light. Here, under the swishing of clouds soft over the lawns, and the fields singing with red wings and pizzicatos from the darkening boughs, where an eyeful of moon will peer in to see us savoring the night. Yes. Rumi, the tavern. All day I think about it. Then at night I say it. Where did I come from? And what am I supposed to be doing? I have no idea. My soul is from elsewhere. I'm sure of that, and I intend to end up there. This drunkenness began in some other tavern. When I get back around to that place, I'll be completely sober. Meanwhile, I'm like a bird from another continent, sitting in this aviary. The day is coming when I fly off, but who is it now in my ear who hears my voice? Who says words with my mouth? Who looks out with my eyes? What is the soul? I cannot stop asking. If I could taste one sip of an answer, I would break out of this prison for drunks. I don't come here of my own accord, and I can't leave that way. Whoever brought me here will have to take me home. This poetry, I never know what I'm going to say. I don't plan it. When I'm outside the saying of it, I get very quiet and rarely speak at all. We have a huge barrel of wine, but no cups. That's fine with us. Every morning we glow, and in the evening we glow again. Thank you, Rumi. Thank you so much. This is from my grandfather. I'm coming down to our last few things. May 2019. Whiskey sours. Now I know why you love the taste of that froth and tartness and whiskey on your tongue. The wisp of a sip I had of it each time you kissed me on my boy lips when you came to visit. Now that I have, in my later years, come to appreciate and ably make that classic cocktail, among others, that sour 2 parts bourbon, 1 part freshly squeezed lemon juice, simple syrup, and egg white, all dry shaken, then again with ice, poured and now held in my grown man's hand, that you'd appreciate, that we'd clink with, grandfather to grandson, and in return, that I sip and savor and raise here quietly to honor those sweet days and my always good memories made of you. Love to him in the cosmos. He was such a wonderful man, wonderful grandfather. All right, next to last, a poem from Berlin, from Germany, from Ritterstrasse Nummer 1, March 2015, musing on an old world wooden globe of mysterious mythical topography and curious bottles of, and known bottles of liquor and liqueurs. This is for Rolf and Gabriella. He's the last no longer with us, but she is, so I hope she gets to hear this. In the spirit world, there's bison grass in the spirit world, and a winter-coated bison astride a green meadow. There are clear Kirschwassers in squat and slender bottles, a sehr oude Genever, Jamaican rum, sans steel drums, grappas, tequilas, digestifs aperitifs, a bull-marked brandy, a Highland whiskey. Bottled inside a rolling globe rimmed with lions and angels, arrows and urns, scorpions. Beneath a parchment yellow skin of antique oceans plied by three-masted merchant ships, all billowing sails, under continents from America to Europa, to Nova Hollandia, wild with horses, elephants, ostriches. A spirit world, a spirit-filled world, an inspiriting world. And last for now, till we're together again over these airwaves, these spirit waves, sit back. Run yourself a bath. While it's running, pour yourself a drink, a smooth vino rosso or other aperitivo. Put on Coleman Hawkins or Russ Columbo. Have a slow dance with your partner or a slow kiss. Slip out of your clothes into your bath. Sit back, close your eyes, let your breath flow, your body float, your cares and concerns dissolve in the warm and languid waters. Thank you again, friends, for generously leaning in here, for thinking and feeling in, for drinking in this show. I would be glad if you shared this or other floating poetry broadcast links out to your friends or the whole playlist. I'd also be glad to have your comments on these programs if you listen often, including your experience of this one, Cocktail Hour. Likewise, I greatly appreciate any and all contributions those of you make and would like to make for the work of service I'm doing to engage, enlighten, and encourage here. It's going to be 4 years coming up before long. You can donate by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email. Or you can simply mail a check to me to P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or contribute through the Donate tab at thepoetorialist.com. Is there a theme you'd like me to cover that I haven't? Let me know. Colin at thepoetosphere.com. For new listeners, by the way, I can be privately hosted or sponsored as a working poet in residence in the U.S. or elsewhere to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to a patron. If that's you, email me to explore that. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube, currently on the Floating Poetry playlist and ultimately many other platforms. My shows, as some know, come to you through the Poetosphere, the oasis of possibility that I'm guiding, which you can explore as a visitor or join as a subscriber. I do invite you to explore it, to get your senses wet there. There's all kinds of free content to dip into and a sense of our community of kindred spirits. And I am, at the moment, into the first part of April, making month and year-long subscriptions available for you. So if you're interested in that, there's a yearly one using the code SPRING24, all caps. That's for the yearly subscription. And and one for monthly. That's Spring Now, all one word. Yeah. Well, you might also, on that note, on a different note, a related note, enjoy an interview that I gave by the Naked Voice founder, Chloe Goodchild. That's out on every major podcast platform about compassion, the poetics of life, self, possibility, and more. Just search for Voce, V-O-C-E, Dialogues, Season 2, Episode 2. And there's going to be a second one, a follow-on dialogue with her soon ahead. I will let you know. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in here again. I certainly do. Yes. And until then, may you take time out often to loosen and soften with a good drink and maybe with a love or good friends or quietly with a good book at a cocktail hour of your choosing, where the air is filled with lightness and delightfulness. I raise a glass to you, the last of this gin, a splash of ransom Old Tom gin, a toast to you and to all joy, wherever this finds you, however that joy can find you. Goodbye for now. Good spirits. Salut. Santé. Prost. Skål. Chin chin. Sláinte. Kanpai. Yamas. Na zdrowie. Tage. Cheers.